Have you checked the children? Your little master.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower. It's Jaime Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That is Reezy, y'all, and obviously, Bienvenidos, and welcome to the horror show. Very stoked to have y'all here for another bit of an anniversary sorts relook at an adaptation from my favorite author. As you can see, if you were just stumbling upon the proceedings here, Sai King, El Rey, as I so affectionately call him, is my favorite author, and I went through his entire catalog a number of years ago from the just published order of awesomeness. But today, we talk about something that is not particularly awesome, but it still has to be examined, it has to be discussed, and that is for the 10-year anniversary of Bag of Beezies, yeah, Bag of Bones, everybody. And so this was an A&E adaptation, so A&E of all places. I mean, this is what I was, even as I was about to start filming this, guys, I was like, the early to mid 2000s, so prior to 2017, The Return of the King, as I like to describe it, it was kind of a proverbial dead zone for Sai King as far as adaptations go. There was nothing incredibly prolific in that time period. I mean, I love 11/22/63 on Hulu, but it's really one of the only ones from this particular time period as far as Sai King stuff goes. So you were getting stuff like Big Driver on Lifetime Channel, and yeah, Bag of Bones on A&E, but with a top-tier actor, former Bond himself, Pierce Brosnan, in the starring role, and also the return of director Mick Garris, who I contend has done some very good King adaptations. I actually like the version of The Shining that they did for ABC, and I love The Stand. I find merit in the Desperation adaptation. And so yeah, Mick has been, you know, very close and very cool with Sai King for quite a while. And so yeah, I guess I could understand why he would be one of the choices to go with this. And this film is not bad from a visual standpoint. In fact, it feels like elevated television. They classified this as a miniseries, but it's not really a miniseries. It's just like a two-part event sort of thing. And from what I understand, they broadcast it in the same evening on December 11th of 2011, so 10 years ago, hence the anniversary aspect and everything. And when it was rebroadcast in the UK, they actually, as opposed to showing it in two separate installments, they just lumped it into one 162-minute film, which is the way that I watched it just now. This is, I think, one of the only places you can actually rent it is on Amazon, which is interesting. But, you know, being the completist, I have the DVD, and it does have some, yeah, it's only got deleted scenes. There's really nothing else, so no commentary from Mick or anything like that. And that I will contend that the weakest thing in this, and I'll go on record as well to say that, you know, a lot of people who have watched this show for a long time, as we're circling 300 episodes now at this point. I've been doing this show for like 6 years. And as we are circling that, well, it's not circling a drain, so to speak, but this is a story that I think, you know, this bag of bones should have been left to lie, you know, lie that bag of bones, or whatever the phrase from it is, and lie still, bag of bones. I had to double check the quote. But this is one that I really wish would have been left still. And not just for the adaptation, but I've said countless times that I don't like the Bram Stoker award-winning Stephen King book from, I believe it was 98, if I remember correctly. That's the one factoid I did not jot down here. But yeah, it's a book that most constant readers that I come into contact with love. They love this story. I don't love this story. And the thing that I will at least preface everything here with is that I feel like, even though it's well directed by Mick from a visual standpoint, and his DP scouted out some great spots in Nova Scotia, so we're not actually in Maine, obviously, but you know, from a visual standpoint, I think it's good. The performances, you know, Pierce, he overdoes it from time to time. The fact that I'm so used to seeing him in these suave sort of situations, and not just with Bond, with the Thomas Crown Affair remake. I mean, most of what I've seen Pierce Brosnan do over the years is like a very cool, calm, collected sort of situation, and in this, I don't think he handles those like overwrought sad situations because, you know, as Michael Noonan, he is a character whose wife dies in a exceedingly tragic scenario, and yet the scenes of weeping and crying and sadness and overwrought everything, I don't know if he sells it that well. It feels like some of the acting to me in those situations as opposed to, you know, somebody who's actually experiencing it and where the escapism, you were just totally dialed into it. So he's good in most of it though, so, and because he's a very esteemed thespian, and the supporting cast solid. It's I mean, Jason Priestley, and I always forget how to pronounce Homeboy's name from 90210, but as his agent, he's not too bad. He's not in a lot of it though. Just like we have Matt Frewer, you know, none other than Trash Can Man from The Stand, who is in this as Michael's brother. He's okay, but once again, no heavy lifting. He's in like 2 or 3 different scenes, and so it's definitely where, at the end of the day, and the 2 ladies are solid. You know, I have to double check on their names. So we have, well, the 3 ladies. What the hell am I saying? So Melissa George, who I will always remember from Dark City, but she was very prominent in like the late 2000s into the aughts. You know, she did like Dark City, and I think the cheerleader robbery movie, Sugar and Spice or something. I don't know. I immediately recognized her, as I did Annabeth Gish, who has been in tons and tons of different things. She's just one of those familiar faces, and both of them are solid enough. I will give some major nods to Melissa George's daughter, the character there. She is really awesome. She oversells like the weepiness a little bit, just like I don't know how Mick is directing these peeps, but yeah, it's a sad, scary situation, but the daughter who the custody battle is transpiring over is very good in this movie, and yeah, she overdoes the cheesy smiling at times and overdoes the, you know, weepy crying and stuff, but she sells it well. Yeah, maybe even better than Pierce at times, and they have good chemistry in those particular scenes. But what I really have to just circle back to is the fact that I feel like the script in this, despite having nearly 3 hours of runtime, and often that can be okay enough when you have a King adaptation, it just, for me, it probably exposes the flaws in the source material in some ways. And so I was kind of just, the source material was overbearing, and I've gone on record to say that it's one of my least favorite Stephen King books, and it still is. And I don't think that the adaptation does it any favors, but yet I feel in a lot of ways like the adaptation is relatively faithful, most notably to the themes. I feel like in some ways the A&E Bag of Bones exposes some of the flaws in the source material, in just the boredom of the subject matter, perhaps. I mean, yeah, I've gone on record many times, as I keep saying, God damn it, Fuego, you know, custody battles, and it's really only glazed over in this. There's just the one scene where you get death from Supernatural, and Anything for Jackson, another great film with that actor in it, whose name is eluding me at this particular point. But yeah, there's such a goofiness to certain aspects of this story that I feel like it really just brings to light in the adaptation. Most notably, there is a scene where Pierce Brosnan is Noonan. He has the evil Mr. Burns character with the villainous woman sidekick or whatever, who is like his muscle, so to speak, but she's supposed to be foreboding. I mean, she just looks like evil bitch status or something, evil witch, whatever. But like, I at least will contend that I felt a bit of a fearsomeness in just the viciousness of this millionaire in the source material, but the goofiness of that said source material, I feel like is very much brought to light in this, and it's not just from the portrayal, because I feel like Comey, who actually plays Mad Max, he's pretty dialed in, you know. He's not mailing it in, so to speak. And yet the cheese factor just feels so significant, and it's no worse than in this scene where they go and they try to intimidate Mike Noonan after the court proceedings don't go as Mad Max was hoping, and his daughter-in-law is going to retain custody and all that stuff. But like, they throw him in the water, or they like force him into the water of this Dark Score Lake, the one that this home that he has been staying at is right adjacent to, and the evil woman is like throwing rocks at him, trying to drown him. I don't know, it seemed a little bit more just intimidating and scary, I think, on the printed page, but really, the more I think about it, and it seems like this that made me so critical of the book in the first place, you know, the plotting pace and just the silliness of some of the writing. This scene especially, it's like, oh, when I'm reading it on page, it's okay, right? You know, it's a little bit silly, but when you see it visualized, it's really silly. Now, I will double down and say that it's a little bit gorier than I was expecting. Not like, I mean, we're not talking, I don't know, Psycho Goreman or, you know, Dead Alive or any craziness like that. But as far as the couple scenes where we do have violence, there's where Noonan's wife Jo is really just terribly and tragically mowed down by this bus. Like the blood and the makeup and everything, it's very convincing and tragic. But that's one of the scenes where he's kind of overdoing it, Mr. Brosnan, in my estimation. And there's also one, because I'm not trying to spoil this for anybody who does want to spend the $3.99 on Amazon, and I would definitely contend that if you love the book, shout out to my buddy Lou Sitzma from the Stephen King podcast. He loves this book and yet hates this adaptation. I guess I'm definitely of a divergent opinion with regards to that because of my lack of affinity for the source material, but I would definitely say if you love the book, at least give this a shot, give it a look, because I would love to see in the comments below if you think that it did it any sort of justice, or for me, since I don't like, you know, the book, I'm like, and I don't hate it. Let's, you know, once again, contend art is subjective and everybody is more than welcome to like and love and hate and despise everything as far as their just like their moods and their tastes go, but I think that this is a relatively accurate representation, despite the fact that it is very much cliff notesing and running through. Because the best part about this, for me, is the subplot of Sarah Tidwell. And Sarah Tidwell was a 30s jazz singer who was killed along with her daughter in a very tragic fashion. And that actress, I would say, is probably the best part of this, along with the, you know, little girl who has the whole custody battle raging over her. It's an actress by the name of, oh goodness, I know I wrote it down, Anika Noni Rose. And so a lot of people will probably know her from The Princess and the Frog, where she voiced our said princess. And I still, to this day, believe that that is the last bit of 2D animation that Disney did. And since it was not a big financial success, they're like, nope, just doing Pixar. We're going to have our own animation company, too, to do the 3Ds. And so she's great in this, though. Her voice is tremendous. I like the songs that they had her perform. You know, sometimes I feel like a motherless child, and it's good stuff. Her voice is tremendous. Apparently, originally attached to this project, of all things, was Kelly Rowland from Freddy vs. Jason. And yeah, you know, she was also in Destiny's Child, and she did like a song with Nelly, if I remember correctly. But yeah, she was originally attached to this, and then they brought in Anika instead. And I think that's probably for the better, because of the fact that, you know, it shed the spotlight on somebody who is a little bit more up and coming, as opposed to trying to attach a name. And yeah, it does make me wonder, though, if there were script revisions, because Sarah's story, it's there, but it is totally not focused on as prevalently and as just captivatingly, I guess, as you have in the book. Because in the book, Bag of Bones, you have that lengthy section where, I mean, you're at the carnival-y, circus-y, you know, vaudeville performance sort of place, and yeah, it's grisly, it's horrible, and it's the most compelling part in the entirety of the source material, at least for me. Now, granted, they touch upon it, but then, you know, just barely touch upon everything else. It's another major culprit of a situation where you're trying to whittle down a book that's only in, I think Bag of Bones is only like 400 or 500 pages, something like that. I did revisit it for the book's anniversary a couple years back, but this feels very much just glossing over stuff. And as much as I love Mick, and once again, as I always do, I just blabber as opposed to really glancing at the notes. So there's some fun Easter eggs, obviously. You know, there's a point where Joe is at a book signing with Pierce Brosnan as Mike Noonan, and this crazy fan shows up, and he's got like a stack of books, and he's like, I'm your #1 fan. And she's like, good luck with Annie Wilkes there. So obviously this is a different level of the proverbial tower. so to speak. But another one is where Jason Priestley's character, as the agent, he's asking Mike if he has any trunk books. And we know that King had quite his fair share of trunk books. I mean, Blaze, the Bachman one that he touched up, that was a trunk book. Even Pet Sematary, maybe the greatest thing that Sai King has ever done. Trunk book, something that he thought was so effed up he just locked it away. And so yeah, there is a trunk book that Mike Noonan, at the behest of Jason Priestley as his manager, agent, whatever you want to call it, digs up, and it's at the behest of Jason's character, where he's like, yeah, I heard they unearthed another, Richard Bachman book. They newly discovered one. And so, yeah, we've got our fair share of little, winks and nods. And there's even a scene where Noonan is getting a burger in this diner when he first gets to Dark Score Lake, and he goes out to get a bite to eat after the housekeeper shows up. And it's got to be Ralph Roberts, right? From Insomnia, because I know he shows up in Bag of Bones in that scene early on. And so it's just the fact that he's, warning about, don't get involved with Max's daughter-in-law, she's bad news bears or whatever. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that was supposed to be Ralph Roberts, rest peacefully without spoiling things, because we know what happens with him. But yeah, aside from those little winks and nods and stuff, it starts out this film with all of these scattered images, and it's trying to be artsy, and I guess it is the opening crawl. It's the opening credits, because you do see it before each half, and the drowning aspect and the cyclical, the mythology behind that, and the curse that Sarah, with what happened with her and her daughter, put on those people. But it very much felt to me like something that you would see a few years later in American Horror Story, where it's like, oh, random creepy imagery, here's some owls, and here's some weird paintings, and here's some, it just, I mean, excuse me, it just doesn't particularly work for me, and it felt like just trying to be artsy for the sake of artsy, and I experience that from time to time with films, because I love that sort of indie-centric stuff. I'm a big proponent of A24, and yet when it's being done in this nature where I don't know if it really is serving the narrative in any particular capacity, aside from the different drownings that we see in those opening credits before Part 1 and Part 2. I don't know, man. I don't know. Red team go, red team go. The death of Joe is obviously incredibly tragic, and this is another shout-out that I have to give to Lou, is the fact that he did at least point me to the fact that, yeah, Lacey's Story, which is my current, it's the current Book of the Month review that we did for November, and it's recently up here on the channel. Lacey's Story is very much like the sister book, I guess, to Bag of Bones, and the fact that they're both about authors, but it's told from separate perspectives, because Bag of Bones obviously is about a famous author whose wife, who is, 8-9 months pregnant, something like that, as he tells Matt Frewer, his brother, after the funeral, where he's just down in all the booze. And that's another thing that you can tell that King was probably still struggling with sobriety in the mid to late 90s, because he was still, he was a number of years into it, but from what I understand, it still feels very fresh, and especially when those demons have plagued you for such an extensive amount of time. And so, yeah, we see that in the adaptation here. I can't remember if Mike was really plagued with the booze in the book, because it's been, as I said, a few years since I reread it. So this is, once again, less a compare and contrast sort of thing. But yeah, at least Brosnan's version of Noonan on this level of the tower, he's putting them down, fast and furiously. It's tragic in that regard, but he still keeps it relatively in check. But yeah, the death of Joe, it's done in a just very tragic factor, and the pregnancy alone, and the fact that he was like, I didn't think I could get you pregnant, I went to the doctor and I was told low sperm count, shooting blanks, sort of thing. And yeah, so that's it basically just weaves itself into him wondering, just like as happens with Lacey and various other characters in tons of literature, where you're just wondering, you're like, okay, I'm thinking of The Night House suddenly, which, now that I think about it, probably takes some cues from this just a wee bit. Damn, David Bruckner, this didn't even occur to me until just now. This is happening live on the canon, guys. Damn. Well, yeah, where you're just speculating about potential infidelity of a deceased partner who may or may not be haunting you. And yes, we are led to believe, at least in this adaptation, that she is haunting him because of the magnets on the fridge and the phrases and the ringing of the bell, you know, 1 for yes, 2 for no, and all of that. And something that I speculated as I was rewatching this, I was like, well, how many ghosts has Sai King had in his stories, and countless other people that have been writers over the, you know, extent of the craft? Like, you can say you're a particular spirit, but does that really mean you are? And that's where I'm thinking Night House big time, without spoiling things. So, damn, that movie definitely took a lot of cues from this book, and significantly better than this Mick Garris adaptation. I will contend that for sure. You know, it's another scene that's very sad is where Noonan is just calling Joe's voicemail, and obviously it's going right to voicemail, but he's doing it just to hear her voice. That scene is actually pretty effective, and made me think of Mr. Harrigan's phone, actually, and some of the callbacks. King, you recycler, you. I love you. But the fact that Mike can't, because he throws out the trunk novel, and then he's still trying to write something new, and the fact that Joe was like his inspiration and his muse in a lot of ways, similar to Tabby with Sai King, it's very funny to me how when he gets involved with the young Hotsy Totsy, suddenly he's like, oh, the words are spewing from my fingers once again. And that's probably, aside from the boredom that I feel with the Mr. Burns, you know, custody crap and all that, the thing that I have always found relatively off-putting in this story is the fact that King is very much living vicariously in this, in the fact that an aging writer, dead wife, you know, has this young little cutie in her early 20s with a deceased husband, and oh, it's just perfect, and he was never able to have children himself, and so the fact that she has a daughter, like, they wouldn't need to procreate even if he's still shooting blanks, and I just find it a little just like gross, I guess, is the one thing. But hey, lots of aging men find love with young gold diggers who are living in trailers and have a shot at a very wealthy, famous, older writer. That's what this book is, man. That's what this adaptation is. And so for that reason, I have just always found that aspect off-putting. But it's really the history of what happens with Sarah Tidwell and that sort of conspiracy. But once again, they have to just breeze through it in this, and that's just kind of disappointing because it's so effed up and so much the type of story that needs to be examined and needs to be remembered to just remind those that, like, this was the most fucked up sort of thing that could potentially happen to anybody, you know, regardless of color of skin and everything, but that just cranks up the gruesome awfulness. You know, white men going after a black woman in such a horrible manner. It's really, really terrible. But once again, Mick doesn't, like, bastardize and destroy the source material, but really, for me, the lifeline of this story is not Noonan in this post, you know, widower crisis, you know, trying to get his rocks off or whatever. It's really the most important aspect of this story is everything with our jazz singer from back in the day, and yet they don't emphasize the blues as much as the blues and jazzy sort of stuff as much as they should have. Yes, it's in those few scenes, but I would imagine that Mike Noonan, when he's running around and jogging, he would be listening to Sarah Tidwell. He wouldn't be listening to like this emo crap that he has on at one particular point. And it's very 2011 emo, goofy whateverness. And I'm just like, okay, I enjoyed some of that stuff when it was a thing. And I still do. I still revisit my Brand New and Taking Back Sunday and things of that nature. But doesn't seem like the kind of thing that Homeboy would be listening to in what his 50s or whatever the character's age range is supposed to be. So that's definitely a thing. But I will credit one particular line of dialogue that I'm not certain if it was lifted specifically from the book or if it was just by our uneven scriptwriter who didn't even have like a Wikipedia when I tried to click on him. Yeah, it was essentially a person with no secrets is like a scarecrow without stuffing. Our secrets make us who we are. And that's where Mike was basically kind of digging around trying to find out, okay, did I get my wife pregnant, or when she was spending all this time at Darkscore Lake at this fixer-upper, was she being unfaithful? And yeah, good line of dialogue, but just so much unexplored. Thankfully, they didn't explore the custody stuff as much as they do in the book, because I know King, as he says in some of the foreword in the Bag of Bones book, he's like, yeah, I did so much research and consulted all these people, and I'm like, but why? You know, I'm definitely thinking Woodland Critter Christmas in that regard. But yeah, man, at a whole, you know, I will double down on the fact that despite being pretty well directed from Mr. Mick Garris, I wish these Bag of Bones would lie still. 10 years later, yeah, it's definitely not one of the best representations from the proverbial dead zone as far as Sai King adaptations go. So I extend a grande gracias a Jaime and Fuego, and you can find Wa on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube, where I do have a channel called Infuegotainment, where I'm doing a little bit of Spider-Man coverage leading up to the No Way Home review, which is going to be a discussion between myself and Cecil. Very excited about that. And yeah, and kind of putting together a little 12 Days of Christmas thing as well. 8-Bit Christmas, which is fantastic. Home Sweet Home Alone, which is probably a shitter day, I would say. And yeah, maybe some Batman Returns, Bad Santa, you know, a few other things in there. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that. So jump over there, like, share, subscribe, do the same DZ thing here. Just a reminder, the December book of the month for its anniversary is none other than 11/22/63, greatly adapted by J.J. Abrams for Hulu a number of years ago. One of the only good things, as I said earlier here, in that particular dead zone of Sai King adaptations, or at least the abundance of mediocrity that we had at that particular point. So yep, at the beginning of January, we will be discussing that on Tower Tuesday. And yes, don't forget the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, over 1,000 peeps there having some great palaver. And every Friday, we freak out and we discuss just about anything other than the King Familia. So I've been Fuego, and y'all have been Rat Status. And until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, sen amigos, constant readers and viewers alike, say thank you, hoping we've been well met and we share more of this palaver sooner rather than later. And until then, remember to stay scared. In this case, don't watch Stephen King, read Stephen King, because yes, the Bag of Bones book is significantly better, but I don't love either.